evening and welcome to the Guilderland Central School District's 2018 Meet the Candidates Night. I am Andre Valverde and I will be the moderator for the forum this evening. This program is sponsored by the Guilderland PTA Council and produced by the High School Media Department. The goal of this program is to bring forward the views of the candidates that are present here tonight. There are 4 candidates for the 4 available positions on the Board of Education. 3 of the positions are for a 3-year term, 1 is for a 2-year term. The candidate with the lowest vote count will fill the 2-year term position. The candidates are Benjamin Goes, Christine Hayes, Sean Maguire, and Seema Rivera. This evening's forum will be organized as follows. Each candidate will have the opportunity to give a 3-minute opening statement introducing themselves. Directly after this, we will begin our questions, which have been prepared by the PTA Council members. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer these questions. At the end of the questions, each candidate will have 3 minutes for closing remarks. Questions from the audience are welcome and will be reviewed by PTA Council representatives. Tonight's proceedings should last about 2 hours. There will be no literature distributed. If you are all set to begin, I would like to wish the best of luck to all the candidates, and we will begin opening statements with Benjamin Goes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out or tuning in. Shows that you care, and that's really what makes our school so great, so thank you. I'm Ben Goes. I graduated from Guilderland High School in 2014, and I'm currently wrapping up my 2nd year of law school. School has been a really big part of my life, proportionally, and I spend a lot of time working with children in various capacities. Currently, I coach gymnastics for preschoolers and kindergartners. I teach Sunday school to 4th and 5th graders, and I advise high school juniors and seniors on a great many things. In my last year of high school, I wrote a paper on public education and some of its shortcomings, and that really sparked an interest of mine. After I graduated, I continued to study educational theory and practice as kind of a hobby, although those studies took on an increased sense of urgency after the implementation of E=MC² at the Guilderland High School. E=MC², which is the high school's open inquiry class, has given me the tremendous privilege of working with some amazing students on their research projects, and I'm incredibly grateful to the coordinators and the administrators who gave me such an opportunity. Being in the high school regularly and working and talking with teachers and administrators and support staff, forming relationships with so many great students it's been a very rewarding and insightful experience. And it's really shown me how much I care about our schools and the students that they serve. These kids deserve the best that we can give them. I'm running to be a member of the Guilderland Board of Education because I'm extremely passionate about the success and well-being of Guilderland students. I think that I would be a valuable addition to the board, as my relative youth would give me a unique perspective on many of the issues facing the board today, a perspective that might be more in line with the views of current students who will be affected by the decisions that we make. Guilderland does a great job of serving students and preparing them for success in the 21st century, but we can always do better. The world is changing, and as Guilderland continues to move forward and seek innovative ways to better serve and respect students, I expect there will be a lot of very important conversations at the school board level. I look forward to participating in those conversations and offering the perspective of a recent student. Thank you.
We will now continue with Christine Hayes.
Thank you, Andre. And thank you to the PTA Council for hosting this event, and thank you to my colleagues here at the table. My name is Christine Hayes, and I'm a lifelong resident of the Capital Region. I grew up in Guilderland, attending Westmere Elementary, Farnsworth Middle School, and graduating from the high school. And I'm seeking re-election to the board because I would love the opportunity to continue to use the knowledge and training that I've gained throughout the last several years to support the mission and vision of the district. I also love being involved in the district and the community. I graduated from the high school with a solid educational foundation. With this foundation, I felt comfortable and prepared to go on and earn a bachelor's degree, a law degree, a master's degree, and a certificate of advanced study in the area of education. I believe it's important for all students to feel this level of comfort and preparedness as they move beyond the district. Today I am employed as an attorney at Albany Medical Center, where I provide legal services and advice on a wide variety of unique and complex legal issues. This work requires me to thoughtfully and thoroughly explore issues from many different viewpoints and develop creative solutions to problems as they arise. I believe that these skills are essential to the work of a school board member because the district is constantly reviewing and responding to issues created by new education laws and directives as they are being developed at the state and federal level. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to my legal experience, I also have a Certificate of Advanced Study in Education, which at one point enabled me to earn my initial certification as a grade 7 through 12 social studies teacher. In the past, I spent time student teaching and substitute teaching in the Guilderland schools. This first-hand experience gave me some insight into the educator's perspective, and I believe this gives me the ability to analyze issues in a different way. Although I believe it is particularly important to hear from the district's educators on issues, because there's really no substitute for that voice. In sum, I would love the opportunity to continue to serve the district and the community, so I would ask that you please consider voting for me next Tuesday on May 15th. Thank you.
And now, Sean Maguire.
Well, thanks so much to the PTA Council for having us here. I'd like to also thank the other members of the Board of Education for being here and the GTA. There's so many essential partners that are here in this room. I feel like I've been in the seat a couple of times in the past year, so I'm going to probably be the one candidate you have the most to know about, because I've spoken to the community a number of times about my background, my vision, my goals, and more importantly, the two significant investments I have in the school district: my daughter Emily, who's in 4th grade, and my son Jack, who's in kindergarten. So I'm clearly, a consumer of the product that the school district puts out there. But, that's only one reason for running. The other is because as a professional economic developer and planner, I'm a director of economic development and regional analytics for the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. I know what it takes to make a successful community, and the education system is clearly a part of that. I spent the last week in Texas actually learning with nearly 200 economic developers about our trade and our practice. And just the week before that, I had a good opportunity to speak with site selectors who are charged with doing a great deal of work with businesses to locate them in areas and communities. And there's one overwhelming theme that we take away from that, and that successful communities are the cornerstone, or the keystone rather, to economic development and opportunity. And why is that important? Well, it's important for us that live here and work here because we love this community and we need to have something that sustains us, allows us to be here. But it's also critical for our students. I firmly believe that the bottom line for the school district is to prepare our students for lifelong success. I've said that before, I'll say it again, and that's maybe I have a tattoo of that somewhere, I don't know. But that's critical. That's very important to keep that in mind. And so being a proactive member of a Board of Education, being actively involved in the community, being an advocate for these places that we live in is critical and important. And this is a fine balancing act that the board is charged with. This is not something that you can take on lightly. You're not only are you dealing with the future of children, but you're dealing with people's pocketbooks and people's wallets. And that's something that you have to be critically sensitive of. I'd like to think that I have some great experience working around the state with communities on ways to be more efficient in my prior life before I joined the state. And so I hope to bring that same experience and that same tenacity for these creating vibrant communities. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the rest of the evening.
And now to close it off, Seema Rivera.
First, I want to thank the PTA Council for putting this together and the members of the community for coming out and watching at home, and to my fellow colleagues here at the table. The main reason I'm rerunning for the board, the school board, is I have a vested interest in students and education. I'm just going to give you some examples of that, particularly in Guilderland. So I also grew up here in Guilderland. I went to Westmere, Farnsworth, in the high school. When we started our family and I knew my older daughter was going to go to school, we purposely moved back to Guilderland because of my great experience here. And so my older daughter's a 3rd grader at Guilderland Elementary, and I'll have a second daughter going to be a kindergartner there this fall. And we've enjoyed our time in Guilderland. My mom is still in Guilderland. She owns a small business in Guilderland, so we're obviously very vested in the community. A little bit about my background. I first started my career as a chemistry teacher. I taught in the Bronx, then I taught in Germantown and Cairo, Durham, then I went back to UAlbany and got my PhD in curriculum and instruction, and so now I'm a STEM ed professor at Clarkson University's Capital Region campus. I teach graduate students who are going to be teachers, and because of that I also get to do research on STEM teacher identity development. I get to focus on issues that are important to me, like equity in education, broadening participation in STEM. I teach a course called Modern Teacher. We talk about the climate of schools, like school safety. We talk about bullying. These are regular things that I get to talk about. I feel very fortunate that my role as a Board of Ed member and my job as a professor actually really complement each other. And so I think that's a huge benefit for my perspective. Another thing I think that's unique about me is that I think I'm the only person here who has experience on the board and also a parent in the district. So I'll get to look at perspectives as an educator, a parent, and a board member who has a little bit of experience now. But more importantly than anything, I think I'm a good listener and a good team member. What I've learned from my first term on the board is I'm only one of 9, and more important than anything is being able to be that bridge that brings people together and trying to work together. Sometimes we're in situations where there's no right answer or it's a tough situation, and a lot of people have a lot to say about different issues. And really these issues are above one person, they're above than just the district. And so being able to communicate and work well with others, I think, is more important than anything. And so I hope by the end of tonight you get to know a little bit more about me. Thank you.
And now on to the prepared question segment of the night. The first respondent for each question was chosen previously tonight by lottery. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond, and the order of secondary respondents will reverse after each question. So beginning with Seema, what do you think your role is as a member of the Board of Education?
Well, the role of a Board of Ed member really is to help set policy at the district level, help make decisions regarding the school budget, and really listening to the community. So I know that through my work so far with the school board is we work a lot with the district office team, and so one of the things we do as a school board is we, like I said, work on policy, we make decisions, and then we see how we work with the superintendent, and then she implements those plans and decisions and policies at the district level. And so my job, I guess, as a school board member is to ask questions, to the district office when we don't understand something, to make sure that the district is being fiscally responsible. For me, ultimately, is to make sure that each student is getting the best education possible. I know lots of times as a school board member, there's so many different issues that come up, and the best way to clear everything for me is I go back and say, what's best for students? And so that kind of cuts through things, and it's easier to make a decision when you look at things like that. Also, being responsive to the community. I know that my work on the communication subcommittee, I'm always advocating for getting as much feedback from the district and the community as possible, and also trying to be as transparent as possible. I know that you can't be transparent about 100% of the things, but to be transparent, I think, is really important, because that's how you earn trust with people in the community, and that's really important in making decisions for the school.
And now on to Christine.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what my colleague Seema said. I think our primary responsibilities are budgeting and policy making. I think it's important that we look at all of the different stakeholders involved in doing these things, meaning students, educators, community members, taxpayers, parents, everybody who comes to the table. I think one of the things that we embrace the most in Guilderland is shared decision making, so I think it's important that we have all of those stakeholders involved and listen to all of those different perspectives in executing our responsibilities. I think also it's important that we are financially responsible and we keep our eye on the bottom line while always acting in the best interest of children. Listening and communicating, I think, are something that should be primary to our jobs. A lot of the times people come in with a preconceived notion or an idea about something and are unwilling to shift that, but I think it's really important to listen to everybody who reaches out to you and all of the different perspectives in making your decisions. I think it's important that we ask tough questions and that we listen to our district experts. If we ask for an opinion or guidance on something, I think it's important that we let those people do the work and give us the feedback and then take that into consideration while making decisions. Thank you.
Mr. Gose?
So I agree with everything that's been said so far. I would basically sum it up as the role of a school board member is to communicate with everyone. So, you know, to understand how the community feels about certain issues, you have to go out and you have to talk to the people involved, the parents, the kids, the teachers, the district office. You have to, at school board meetings and outside school board meetings, ask important questions so that you understand the issue, and then convey your thoughts to the other board members so that if they haven't thought of something, or you know, just to engage in that exchange of ideas that leads to the best outcome. You know, you need to be good at that, and then you also need to be good about communicating the decisions that we make to the district so that the district understands why we chose what we did. And I think that you know, like Seema says, key to all this is keeping the eye on the students and making sure that everything that we do is for them. You know, the board, you know, has vested interest in the school district, but we're not technically a part of the school district, and that little bit of space gives us the space that we need to make rational, good decisions for kids, rather than as a vested interest group in the school district. Thank you.
Mr. Maguire?
Thank you. You know, I'm going to point out, I think, three things that I think are critical, and what I believe my role would be as a Board of Education member. You can certainly read the materials out there that the State Association puts out that says what the role of the school board members are. But I think you have to read between those lines sometimes. You know, I think, you know, first and foremost, the responsibility of the school board member is to represent the will of the voters and the communities and making the best choices for the students. There's a lot of people to serve there, and I think I said that in my opening statement. You have to be very much aware of that. But I think that's critical, and sometimes that does get lost. You know, there are, I think, some pretty clear choices that voters make that through the course of the year, sometimes board members forget about. And I've sat on a board, and I've been in that position before too, and I think it's incumbent upon people to take a moment to sit back and reflect on those decisions that were made at the ballot, and through surveys as well, and make sure that those ideas continue to be reflected. You know, I also think it's important to be a visionary as a board member. You know, it's important to know what we've done in the past. A lot of the data and information that the administration reflects on, you know, is great. It's lagging indicators, so it tells you where you have been. And I think that that's the responsibility of the school district from administrative side. I think the board has to be visionary and has to point the school district towards the future and those things that you need to achieve and those things that you aspire to be as a school district. I think we see a lot of that. You know, I think every year we talk about the school district rankings in the capital region, and the question always comes up, you know, why aren't we higher? Why aren't we higher? You know, I think that fits into that. And the last piece, I think you have to be a leader. You have to be well-versed, and you have to be actively engaged.
And now on to the second question. Starting with Mrs. Hayes, what would be your first priority for next year, and what are your goals for the next 3 years?
It's a good question. Thank you. Well, a number of priorities. I think we heard loud and clear from the community, and also as a board of 9 people, that our top priority really should kind of be to focus on school safety. And I think that's a multifaceted issue. I think it's important that we really clearly work on relationship building. It's important that each student has a personal relationship with an adult in the building so that they feel connected and they feel like they want to be there. I also think that mental health and providing mental health services is really important, which is why I'm so excited about the mental health clinic that will be coming to the district next year. And then additionally, the physical structure of the building and making sure that we have all the safeguards that we can have in place, and I think we're doing a really good job. But it will also be essential to maybe talk to neighboring school districts or colleges, universities, and other local businesses to figure out what they're doing and what are their best practices, and maybe bring some of those home here. Taking a step a little bit further out, I think we've heard loud and clear this year that class size might be something that we want to look at, and maybe it's time that we reevaluate our class size guidelines. I just think it's important that we have a structure that we're working within and we're complying with our own policies. So if we have these guidelines that we're not falling within, maybe it's time that we take another look at those. Additionally, I think it's important that we continue to maintain the rich academic programming that we have, as well as the extracurriculars. At the last board meeting, we had some students come and present, and it was really interesting, and they were so excited about their work with the club. I wish that we could provide more financing for that, or at least be more aware of those sorts of needs throughout the district. So I think those are kind of my top priorities. Thank you.
And now on to Mr. Goes.
In recent years, students at Guilderland High School have become more involved in some of the upper-level decision-making that the district is making. Last year, for example, the Guilderland High School building cabinet and Jonah Goldstein kind of led this effort to eliminate class rank from the policy books here in Guilderland, and that really inspired me. I was really proud of the people involved in that effort, and I would really like to keep that sort of momentum going. So I think that my number one priority for my time on the board would be to keep engaging those student voices. My greatest hope is that by the end of my first term, I'm not the youngest person on the school board, to be perfectly honest. And so until that day comes, I really want to focus on reminding ourselves of the daily experiences of students, in school. I think that for younger kids, we should have smaller class sizes, because I think that relationships are the most important, are the key to any learning and to enjoying school. And I think at the higher levels, we need to de-emphasize standardized testing and the weight that final exams have for students, because that creates a very restricted mentality in schools, and kids are not free to explore, and that decreases the quality of their daily experience. Thank you.
Mr. Maguire?
One of the great things about this whole process, and people probably may disagree, because petitioning, I think, is one of the great things in this whole school board process, because it allows me to knock on the doors of my neighbors, granted around dinner time, interrupt them a little bit, but I've got a way of talking my way in the front door and really engaging with them and finding out what they think about our community and what's going on. And that's really where I've set my priorities, is based on what the community has said. And one of the things I heard repeatedly is that parents have a real desire to be more engaged and more involved in the classroom and in the school environment. And one of the other things I also learned is that how parents are engaged differs from school to school. And some parents find that frustrating. And I think there's got to be a way to address that. I'm not sure of the answer, and that's why I'm glad there's 8 other people that serve on the school board too, because I don't have the answers right now. Hopefully we'll get to that. So, my first priority is to really leverage that, because when somebody has a desire to be involved, I think it's a poor decision not to bring those people right in, to embrace those parents that want to be so involved. There's 3 other areas too, I think, over the next 3 years that I'm interested in spending more time on. Some of my friends here at the table said the same thing: safety and security. We've made a lot of great investments through the capital and physical plan to safety and security. But I've mentioned in the Ultimate Enterprise profile that I had some concerns. My wife and I had some concerns about safety and security in our own school, and how we addressed that is we called our school principal and raised that and said, listen, I think there's something that we should be mindful of and aware of. And it didn't require a single dollar to be spent, which I think was fantastic. The other piece is inclusion. I think we've gone a very long way to creating inclusive classrooms, and I continue to support that. And the last piece is long-term fiscal stability.
And finally, Mrs. Rivera.
My 3 issues that I'm looking at for the next few years on the school board. One, I would have to say safety, because it's come up consistently on surveys to the community, and that is the reality of schools today, is that we have to consider safety. And while I do think the district is doing a good job of looking at safety, it's one of those things that will never end, that we'll constantly have to, it's an iterative process, we'll have to constantly look at safety procedures and look at how safety is focused on at the district. The second is our supports in place to help teachers and staff be inclusive and meet the needs of all learners in their classroom. And we've talked about this, I know, at the board several times about the inclusion model, and I fully in support philosophically with having an inclusive classroom and meeting the needs of all learners, and how that actually is implemented is more challenging. And so I hope that as a school board and as a district, we can continue to find ways to support teachers to meet those needs. And then lastly are it sounds silly, but the relationships. So there's, I guess, relationships, I think about like social emotional learning of our primary learners, I think is really important. And I know that the district already has supports in place for social emotional learning at all levels, so I hope we can continue to do that. And also embracing diversity. I know that when I went to Guilderland as a kid, it looks much different now than from when I was a kid, and so I do think as a district we do embrace diversity, but I think that's something that we can constantly improve upon. Thanks.
And now on to the third question. For present board members, which district committees have you chaired or belonged to, and what did that committee accomplish? For all candidates, please tell us about 2 different school or PTA-sponsored activities other than the community forums that you have participated in this year. Starting with Mr. Goss.
So since I started working in the high school as a volunteer and developing relationships with a whole bunch of students, I've been very, very involved. I go to all their concerts, all their sports games, and to any academic events that they might have. And by academic events, I include like art exhibits, because some of my students are skilled enough to have pieces in art exhibits. And I attend board meetings quite frequently because I think that the things that we're talking about sometimes get a little monotonous and can be repetitive, but at the same time there's a human element to all of it, and it's for the greater good of Guilderland students. So I've been very involved this year, and I plan to continue being very involved. Thank you.
Mr. Maguire?
Sure. Having 2 little kids, I think my most significant activity is playing chauffeur for all the different school events. So and again, talking with parents. So in the past, I've been involved with the building cabinet in our GES, also with the space committee, looking at excess space in the school district and how we handle that. But I'm more broadly involved, I think, in the community as a whole. I sit on the Industrial Development Agency, which is a critical economic development tool for this community. I was really proud that in the redevelopment of the former Best Western down by the University at Albany, when we did that deal, my contribution to that was to ensure that the tax base was protected, that when a payment in lieu of taxes was put in place, I also amended that and asked for an escalator to be added to that agreement to ensure that not only was there a floor on the taxes that were paid on that property equal to what is being paid now, but that we didn't lose ground over time due to inflation. And that's I think being a planner and dealing with data all the time, I'm always thinking about the constant dollar, and I'm always worried about inflation and what 10 years of money can do and how that can change. And also being on the county's planning board gives me an opportunity to know what's happening sometimes before the school board knows. Hopefully the administration knows when development is happening or serious development is happening in the school district. But that gives me an opportunity to really have my finger on the pulse as to what's happening. And why is that important? Well, as we look at school enrollment projections and the future of our community, I think you have to know the goals and the objectives and the direction this community has for development. We have, a pretty significant proposal on the plate right across from Farnsworth Middle School. I'll probably see that if that moves down the road at the County Planning Board, and I'll have the opportunity to weigh in at that time. So, thank you.
Mrs. Rivera?
So I've served on the communications subcommittee, and I've served on the policy subcommittee for the school board. For the communications subcommittee, that one's really important to me because I'm all about communication, and so a few things that we've done there is we've been working on making a manual for new board members, and also just processes for how we function as a school board. The school board, I think, is kind of unique because it's constantly changing, and so there's constantly new people coming on and people leaving, and so how things happen, I think, is really important. That's one thing that we've done. Some other basic, simple things are communication in the district with regards to email, or, my role as a liaison at the different PTAs. So, for example, there was an issue with one of the PTAs and people sending email to the district and not getting replies, and so I just made sure that there was some kind of response to that so people don't feel like their emails are going, into a black hole. It seems simple, but these are important communication issues that, that matter to people. And so some things like that. On policy, we've done different things. Transportation, when I first joined the board, I learned very quickly if you don't have a policy, like naming fields, it can get into trouble. And so we kind of went backwards, and we learned a lesson from that. That was kind of like a good lesson for me as a new board member on how impactful policy is. So communications subcommittee and policy, and then I've worked on the Guilderland Elementary School PTA as a volunteer before I was on the board, and then as I've been on the board, I've been the the grants kind of person on there. So when teachers submit grants, I'm one of the people that help kind of administer that process, and then hopefully we can support as many teachers as we can, and then helping with the after-school enrichment there as well.
And finally, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you. So during my tenure on the board so far, I've made a conscious decision to try to serve on each subcommittee, which would include audit, business practices, communication, and policy committee, because I think it's important that board members have an understanding of all of those different areas of work that we engage in. So each of those committees kind of looks at issues and makes recommendations to the full board, but they're able to take a closer look at the nuances of those issues and make informed recommendations to the full board so that lengthy discussion doesn't take up too much time at the board meetings. I actually have not chaired any of those committees, but for the last 2 years I've served as the president of the school board. Prior to that, I served as vice president of the school board, and I think during that time frame we've just made kind of some structural changes to the way that our meetings are set up to make them more efficient and flow a little bit more smoothly than maybe they once did. And again, I'm really excited to continue on with this work because I feel like every day that I come here I'm learning more about the district and I'm able to contribute a little bit more. So thank you for that.
And now on to question 4. As a Board of Education member, how would you approach making decisions that could potentially affect you or your family? For example, redistricting, the closing of school, or labor union negotiations. Starting with Mr. Maguire.
Sure. I think there's a couple of members on the board that have experience with family members working for the district. And I think that, the practice is to recuse yourself, is to make that pretty clear and be transparent about it, and then remove yourself from that discussion. So, if I had somebody in my family that was working for the district, I would take that same approach. When it comes to some of the other questions you asked about, closure of a school and so on, it's going to be critical for me to have an open ear, to hear what's going on, to understand what the community's goals and objectives are, and respond to those. I don't think it's a secret that to anybody that knows me is that I was never in support of a closure of Altamont Elementary School. I think that was a huge mistake to even go down that road. One of the qualities of the village is the school, is the elementary school there. And I think to close a school like that, really puts the village at a disadvantage and does a disservice to that entire community. I take the same approach if it were my own school. In fact, I think GES has some issues with numbers. We have I think we're the largest, if I'm correct, the largest elementary school in the district. And so, space is at a premium. And so how are we going to deal with that moving forward? It certainly affects me. I have a certain interest there. But listen, I'm telling you all about that now. You know what that interest is. You know the direction I'm coming from. But listen, I have friends friends that have children in every one of the schools around town. And believe me, I'll get an earful if decisions are being made that are going to affect them. I got an earful, in fact, leading up to this with the size of classrooms, with where that was potentially heading. I love to talk to people about it. I love to hear about it, and hopefully offer some solutions, or at least talk through those issues. Thank you.
And now on to Mrs. Rivera.
I think, well, I don't have anybody in my family that works for the district, but if I did, then I would recuse myself. But I know there's times where, I've purposely left myself out of maybe a search committee or things like that when I know that someone who is being hired for, or, applying for a job, it's best to be transparent. It's best to not put yourself in that spot. And so I do that. With regards to all the other, I guess, issues that you brought up, I do my best job to try and listen to what people in the community are talking about, and not just be focused just on one particular school. So I've gone to events at all of the elementary schools. I've gone to events at the middle school. I've gone to events at the high school, and then beyond the school, I've gone to so many events in the community with sports, the public library, etc. So I feel like, I try to look at the district as a whole, all 7 buildings, and the families that live in the community. So I think, just like any decision, I try to be more informed and really listen to people. But again, it's one of those things where you listen and you bring back what you know, and then you talk and you ask questions, and you don't rush to make any decisions. And yeah, I think that's it.
And now on to Ms. Hayes.
Thank you. Well, I think it's essential for a board member to be independent and objectively make decisions. One of the positive things about me, I think, is that I currently don't have any children enrolled in the school, so I kind of look at the district as one big picture. I don't have any special allegiance or bias to one particular building or grade level or activity, and so I think maybe that makes it a little bit easier for me, because I don't have to push those things aside when I'm looking at issues. I can just look at the big picture. And I also think it's important to really listen to all of the stakeholders that come forward and consider all of the ideas that are presented, and ask tough questions and try to look for that objective answer that truly is in the best interest of the students and all of the other stakeholders that are in the district day to day. And sometimes perception of what you're doing also really makes a big difference, because sometimes information that we get is confidential and we can't share it with the community, but it does kind of play a role in some of the decisions that you're making. So trying to keep that in mind and just make the most fair and transparent decision that you can while listening to everybody. Thank you.
Finally, Mr. Gose.
So I think this is a great question, because the board often does have to make very difficult decisions that are contentious, and that, for all the talk of going out into the community and listening to what they're saying, the community is actually 10,000 different people who all have a different view of something. So ultimately the decision does come down to us, and they can be difficult decisions to make. And that's why I think it's so important that we are kind of have some space, that we are kind of independent from the rest of the district. I don't have any family members who work for the district. I don't have any kids who are enrolled in the district. But I think that we all have, myself included, have programs and things that we're attached to that we want to see thrive, our own personal interests. And so I think it's very important that when we step in, that we wear different hats, right? So I can be passionate about enrichment at the high school, but as a board member, when I'm in that role, I have to wear a different hat of kind of remembering that the district is not my plaything. It's that I work for the district to ensure that the district is healthy and growing and moving in the right direction. Kind of like a board of directors for a company. Yeah, they make the decisions, but the decisions are for the good of the company, not for the good of the directors. If there was any situation where I would directly benefit or or directly lose from a decision that the board makes, which, as I said, seems unlikely, then I would recuse myself. Thank you.
And now question 5. Beginning with Mrs. Rivera, how do you plan to be an active Board of Education member, representing your community?
I would probably continue doing what I have been doing. So the school board, obviously you probably know, it takes up a lot of time. It's volunteer. So I will continue to read and prepare myself for the meetings, attend as many meetings as possible. There are also times where, the district asks us to volunteer, for example, to sit in with the library meeting, or teachers in the district invite us to come to their classrooms. I take every opportunity that I can to go and do that. I know they appreciate it. We have moving up day ceremonies and award ceremonies at the end of the year. I try to attend as many as possible. What was the question again?
How do you plan to be an active Board of Education member representing your community?
Thank you. And, I'll continue to, like I said, communication is important to me. I think that's, I said this last time when I joined the board, is that I was hoping that I could be a better bridge in terms of the community and communicating to the district. And I think I've done an okay job. I think I can do better. I think now that I've finished one term, I have a little bit better idea. There is a learning curve to this, understanding the processes of things, understanding and learning who's who, the key players are, those kinds of things. So I think at this point, I would be a better Board of Ed member because I have some experience, and continue to support the students in the district in as many ways as I can. I've gone to school, our high school musicals, the high school plays, the Pops concert, sporting events, the Linwood Longhouse, FMS, the E&L extravaganza, like I said, visiting classrooms, the focus lunch, electronics recycling, pretty much anything that I can go to that's involved in the community with my kids, especially, I go to.
And now continuing with Ms. Hayes.
Thank you. I will maintain at least at minimum the same level of participation that I currently engage in, which is attending all of the board meetings, actively participating on committees of the board, attending PTA council meetings. I've also tried to make an effort of recent, one of the things that I value most, or I think that can be very important to students here, is increasing our community partnerships. So recently I facilitated a meeting between several teachers and administrators here at the high school and my place of employment, Albany Med, to try to set up some sort of a partnership, and there's lots of exciting ideas there. I think it's important that kids have those opportunities to engage with professionals in our community because we do have so many. And then when my schedule permits, I try to engage in other opportunities as they present themselves. I recently had the opportunity to assist with on the high school principal hiring committee, which was really an interesting experience for me as a board member, but also professionally, just to kind of see that process unfold. So I like to be engaged as much as I can, but also being cognizant of my work responsibilities as well. Thank you.
And now Mr. Gose.
I think it's very important to be seen and to be involved in the community that we're serving. If the extent of our activity with the district is that we show up on Tuesday nights at the LGI to talk about things that we haven't seen firsthand, then we're not doing a very good job. To that point, like I said earlier, I have a pretty regular contact with a lot of students and a lot of staff members, and at church, a lot of other members of our community, and I try to attend as many things that are important to them as I possibly can, because relationships are very, very important to me. And so the students that I work with, if they're having a fundraiser, if they're having a concert at Barnes & Noble, if they're having a tennis game at Boston Spa, then I do my best to get there and see them, just so they know that I do care. Even if we don't get a chance to talk, because they're doing their thing and I'm doing my thing, I want them to know that someone cares, which we all do. The other thing is that I try to be very, very available to the people who might need to get a hold of me. People have my phone number and my email address, and I do my very best to respond right away. my supervisor at the high school, when I volunteer there, he forgets sometimes that I have my own school and my own life, because every time he tries to text me or call me, I answer the phone or I text right back. So he thinks that my law school career is just something I tell people, because no matter what time of day he tries to reach me, I'm right there for him. Thank you.
And now Mr. Maguire.
Like Seema, you'll find me at every event at GES supporting the kids. Although Thursday night I got a challenge, I've got to get my son to soccer, and they've got a concert. So where's Sean going to be that night? I think being an active member of the board doesn't stop on the Tuesdays during the week. My wife reminded me when I started circulating my petitions about being a fire commissioner, about how my trips to the supermarket probably took twice as long as they needed to, because I would always run into somebody that wanted to talk about something. And so she said, you realize it's not only the supermarket now, but it's a soccer field, it's church, it's everywhere you go. And I said, that's what I love about this stuff. This is what I love doing. I don't do this bit, out of a sense of it's something I have to do. I do it because I truly enjoy it and I love it. I love talking to people about what their concerns are. To give you an example, I saw that Farnsworth Middle School has a Future Cities team, and I reached out to Mr. Lassiter and said, listen, how can I get involved in that? Because as a planner, I'd love to share that experience with the students, regardless of the outcome of any election. And so I'm going to continue to do that, continue to look for opportunities to share my knowledge and experience with the students, continue to look for opportunities to connect with the community, and again, listen to what people have to say, understand what their priorities and their expectations are, and bring that back here. I am not an independent voice. I'm responsible to the voters and to this community, and I think that's an important thing to remember. I appreciate what Ben said, is that you're a member of a board of directors here, but I'm also a shareholder. I've got 2 shares, and I think that's critically important.
And now on to question 6. Beginning with Ms. Hayes, without respect to cost, if you had the power to make any one change in the school district, what would it be?
Just one change. I think one that is something we can do and start to look at would be later start times in the high school. We've seen the research. We know that it helps students. We've been talking about it for years and years. I know there's some obstacles, but I think this really is something that we can start to work towards, and that we should start to work towards, and maybe be a leader in the community in this area, instead of looking at the barriers that the other districts have told us about and ruling it out. I think it's something that's really important that we should continue to look at for the health of our students, for the performance of our students, just getting them ready for the future. I think kids need to come first, and if the research shows us that, then we really need to keep our eye on that ball. Thank you.
Now Mr. Gose.
Like I've been saying, I'm very concerned about the daily experiences of students in school. So I think that if there was no cost, the types of changes that I would make would be, curricular, in that I want students to have stronger relationships with their teachers. To that end, I think we need smaller class sizes, and I also think that we need less of an emphasis on tests, because the tests kind of set up the teachers and the students as adversaries, right? Because this person at the front of the room is kind of determining your worth, and we know, as with a little bit more perspective, that grades aren't everything. But for a lot of these students, getting a very bad grade on a test is devastating to them. And who did it come from? It came from the teacher, the one who actually cares tremendously about them and wants them to be happy. And so I think that the way things are organized right now tends to hinder relationship building in schools. So, like I said, I'd like to put the emphasis on relationships by decreasing the outside authorities and standards that teachers have to please, so that they can focus on their students, and hopefully they can have less of those students so that each student can have more face time with the teacher. Thank you.
Now Mr. Maguire.
You said irregardless of cost, right? I have
Yes.
an open checkbook here, a pot of gold. It's not feasible. I said it last year. I said if every student could have a teacher, that's what I would do. You get a teacher, you get a teacher, you get a teacher, everybody gets a teacher. Because I think smaller class sizes are critically important. If we could get there, that's where I'd like to be. Again, but we're living in a day of the 2% property tax cap. And that's very difficult to overcome. So we've got to find ways to be creative to be able to maintain those smaller class sizes. The other thing that I really wish we could do, and if I had that unlimited pot of money, we could. It would be pre-K in this district. We've got the private pre-K programs, but having paid those bills, if you don't have a really stable income, and I'm talking, well above middle class. The cost of pre-K can be out of reach for individuals and for young learners. And seeing what the demands are at the kindergarten and through K through 2 levels, and what those learners need to be able to synthesize and do in that short period of time. Being able to have that extra year on the front end and that pre-K, I think, makes a tremendous difference. If you have a child that's gone through pre-K and entered kindergarten, you know it makes a huge difference. And so if we could do that, I'd love to do more to support our youngest learners, because they're at such a critical formative stage, that to miss that opportunity, I think, would be tragic.
And finally, Mrs. Rivera.
I think being able to, support like all enrichment and activities and clubs, I think that would help make things equitable across the district. I know lots of times we are discussing, what can we support and what can we not support, and it always comes down to, can we pay, for this club or this activity, or people ask, still for the foreign language at the elementary school, the FLES program, or the academic clubs that maybe don't get as much limelight as some sports, and students at all of the buildings are fundraising in some way. And so if we could just eliminate fundraising somehow, and then just being able to offer all of these opportunities to all the kids, I think that would have a huge impact. And like I said, it would make things a bit more equitable. And only one thing, so that's the thing I pick.
And now on to question 7, beginning with Mr. Gose. If school funding decreased next year, what areas of the budget would you cut? If you did not want to make cuts, what are your thoughts on alternative ways of funding programs?
So, this is a question designed to make me enemies, right? But I think that I would cut some of our foreign language classes, some of those extracurriculars, because recent data has shown that, and personal anecdotes have shown that students don't take those types of classes seriously, like they could if they were serious about learning the subject, because they think that they don't matter. They do matter, and someday in life they'll wish that they had taken those classes more seriously. But recent self-reporting surveys of students who have taken 4 years of a foreign language in high school, they were asked, how much more confident are you more confident communicating in this language than you would have been without those 4 years? If we dropped you in a foreign country, do you think you could do it? 98% said no. And that's a startling number. It's probably a little exaggerated, but at the same time, we're pouring a ton of money into these programs. Not a ton, but if our budget decreased and we had to make those difficult decisions and cut some things, I think that some of these classes could be consolidated, and at the same time, the things that the students really want and enjoy, right? So like their sports teams and their clubs, I wouldn't want to cut those, because that can make school worth coming to each day, and that's where friendships are formed, and you learn a lot of life lessons through those extra activities, and I think that those are very important for our school to have.
Onwards to Mr. Maguire.
Can you just repeat that, because I might have misheard you, and I don't want to say the wrong thing.
If school funding decreased next year, what areas of the budget would you cut? If you did not want to make cuts, what are your thoughts on alternative ways of funding programs?
But let me not start out with the cut side of things. Ben's right, you'll make enemies that way. I think one of the things that I would do is you would find me down in Albany, talking to our representatives and figuring out why this is going on and why we are here. Because I think the minute that we start to get a hint of cuts like that, we have to be advocates. We have got to get out in front of the issue and not let the issue drive us, and not let us be reactive by just taking the knife to the whole thing and starting to make cuts. If we get past April 1st and that's the cards we're dealt with, I think it's upon us to go back and make sure that we're providing the essentials, the essential fundamentals first, and make sure that those are provided for, and start building back up from there. If we didn't want to make cuts, the other thing is to look at is this community willing to fund itself and to raise taxes? I mean, that is always an option. Again, back to the 2% tax cap. People treat that as an impassable barrier, and I disagree with that. I think that tax cap exists to force boards like this one, like a town board, like the county legislature, to make a very strong case and compelling case to the community when taxes need to be raised above and beyond what the tax cap limit is. And so, probably in order of priority, one is advocacy for that funding. Again, I have no problem knocking on doors down at the Capitol, and people will tell you that. Two is to go back to the community and say, is this your desire, is to cut programs, or are you okay with a tax increase that's above and beyond what we've normally expected? And three, if the community says, that's a no-go, that's a non-starter, then we've got to get back to basics.
Thank you. Continuing with Mrs. Rivera.
First, I would look internally and see where could we save money? Where could we share services with other districts? I know we use BOCES for some programming, so I would look and see what else can we do there to save money if we're in a tight budget. Continue to build viable partnerships. I know a lot of the schools use like Price Shoppers Tools for School. We have the recycling event a couple times a year. We offer some of the online classes for college credit for some students. Anything like that, first I would look internally and see where we could save money. And then second, I would want to be transparent. I know this, the budget process starts with, let's look across the district and see where, if we had to reduce, the budget by 2% across the district, work with the district office team, work with the administrators, and see first, let them, the people who are there in the building, make those decisions about where they could see they could make those changes, and then bring it back to the district and the board and go from there. So I wouldn't start just cutting programs. I would first look and see where we could be creative and come up with some solutions first. And then I would go back to the question of what are we doing here that has the most impact on students? And so what do we want to keep and work from there? I think the important piece, though, is when you're working within a tight budget, again, is communication. Working with the district office team, working with administrators, and working with the faculty and staff at all of the buildings. So you're not just looking at one particular building or program, which I think would be unfair to do that. Thank you.
And finally, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you. So one option you gave were no cuts, and if no cuts, where would you look? I think that the cuts that I would be willing to make should only really be enrollment driven, or one that have little to no impact on children. I think in Guilderland we have a great booster club that supports a lot of our athletic teams, but I also think there's an untapped resource in our community. For example, last year I was able to facilitate a $15,000 donation to the district to replace the sign on the high school football field. And that wasn't a big lift on my part to do that. I think there might be other willing partners in the community if we did decide to go that route and go out and maybe ask for some community support. I think it's important that we maintain our programming, but of course there are always tough decisions to be made, so anytime we make those decisions, again, communicating and having all of the information and being objective in your decision making is important. Making sure that it's equitable across the district, just like Seema said, you're not taking from targeting one particular building, one particular level. You're looking for efficiencies throughout the district. And I definitely think there are some efficiencies we would be able to find if that situation were to arise, but hopefully it doesn't. Thank you.
And now on to the final pre-written question. What do you think are the strengths of Guilderland Central School District? What would your role be in protecting and building upon these strengths? Beginning with Mr. Maguire.
Well, the clear strengths are the teachers in the school district. That's why the school district ranks where it is because the teachers are inspirational, and they're the ones who are doing the heavy lifting every day with the students. So I put a lot, I give a lot of accolades to the staff here. I think the community is also another part of the strength of this school district. Talked about Seema, I believe, talked about the diversity, and I think for a suburban school district, we have tremendous diversity. My children are interacting with quite a mixed classroom, and not something that you probably see in Shenendehowa or Bethlehem or Niskayuna, and not to call them out, but I did. But I think that's one of the advantages here is the exposure to different people, different cultures. I think it's outstanding and tremendous. And the community support as well. People are very passionate about their schools here in the school district, and I think that that's important. One of the challenges, though, is that, during this whole process, people say, this is a thankless job, why do you want to do that? But in the same breath, they realize how important and how critical it is that people step up and take on this responsibility. So, I really appreciate this opportunity to be able to do that, to fight for our students, fight for our community, and to work with our teachers to produce the best product possible, which is outstanding students.
And now Mrs. Rivera.
First, also the faculty and staff here. From my own experience, there's a reason why I moved back to Guilderland. I had a really great experience, and I wanted my children to also have that experience, and that kind of leads into the community of Guilderland. There's a sense of pride in the town, and I really like that. That's, like I said, part of the reason why I moved back here. There's a spirit here that I see not just in sports, but I see in academics, and as we talked about the growing diversity in the community, I really see how the community has embraced that, and I think that's great, and I hope that we continue to embrace that. I also see we're really strong with technology, and there's also a balance of technology with the social and emotional learning of students, and I guess that really represents what's happening, not beyond Guilderland, but I think Guilderland is great at how do we embrace technology and how do we balance that with meeting the needs of students in other ways as well. And so I feel like we're really on the cusp of how we do that, and I think we are leaders in the area in terms of technology and how we balance that with the rest of the program that we offer for our students. And I do see through my work that a lot of other teachers in other districts look to our district as leaders, and to, they come here because they know that they're going to learn from the teachers here, and they're going to be able to talk to the experienced staff here. And so, all those things together, I think, are huge strengths of the district.
Mrs. Hayes? Ms. Hayes?
Thank you. I think our biggest strength is in our people, whether that's any staff member or employee of the district, our students, our community members, our taxpayers. I think everybody has so much to give, and it's important that we listen to those voices. Everybody has talents and something to offer, and so with that listening ear, I think that's our biggest strength. I also think that our location is a strength. We're surrounded by a number of colleges and universities and hospitals and nanotech companies and biotech companies, and that all of those people would be excited to participate with students in the district. And so I think our people and our location are our biggest strengths.
And finally, Mr. Gose.
So I agree with a lot of what's been said. The strong, what makes or breaks any school district is its people and the relationships that they have with one another. So teachers, parents, students, and the respect and communication that they all have with one another to ensure that everything flows smoothly. And I also like that Guilderland is always looking forward and planning for the future and embracing technology and embracing new methods of instruction, because, like I said in my opening remarks, the world is changing and schools, need to keep up with that, and I think Guilderland has its finger to the pulse there. But I think what I would add is that Guilderland has tremendous opportunities for student involvement. I tell a lot of my friends in college that you can't just trust the degree to get you anywhere. You need to do something more and be active in the school. And it's very easy to not be active, right? It's very easy to just stay at home and, or in a student's case, come to school, go to class, go home, do your homework, and that to be the extent of it. But it's not easy to do that in Guilderland because there's just tremendous amount of opportunities for student involvement. GHS media, sports teams. Some of our sports teams, have 100 kids on them. And it's just really amazing how involved students are in, getting things from the school district, but also contributing to the school district. So how would I protect these things? Just keep in mind that they are our strengths, right? And so whenever it comes time to make some of those difficult decisions, we remember why people move to this district and want their kids to go to our schools, and it's because we have these very special traits. Thank you.
Thank you. With that question, we have concluded the written questions part of tonight's program. We have one audience-submitted question that was submitted earlier in the night, but apart from that, Mrs. Valverde, are there any other questions generated from the audience? So, starting with Mrs. Rivera, how are you going to make sure your decisions reflect what the community wants?
Oh, that's a good question, and that's a tough question. So I know that from I'll give you an example for the budget. That's a big decision, right, that the board makes, and we always want to be reflective of the community. So we offer many opportunities for people to come and communicate to the district, either in person or an email or a digital survey. So there's ample time that they can come and share their thoughts and opinions. And then once that, I guess, those thoughts and questions are raised, we really have to take into consideration so many different viewpoints, and so that's when it gets really tricky, because sometimes there are no right answers, and so you need to be thoughtful and listen to the people who work at the district, who will actually be the ones impacted by the decisions that you do make. But you also want to be thoughtful about the issue at hand and think about maybe if it's parents or other people in the community who also may be impacted. And so I think by having those transparent discussions are really important. And so sometimes, you may agree with someone, sometimes you may disagree, but the important part is that you have that well-thoughtful, timely discussion, and that it's transparent. And I think even if people don't agree with you at the end, they can respect that process.
Ms. Hayes?
Andre, can you repeat the question one more time?
How are you going to make sure your decisions reflect what the community wants?
Okay. I think it's important to listen and to show up and to do what you say you're going to do. So I hope, I consider myself a pretty approachable person. I'm always reachable by email or phone or in person, and I make an effort to listen to everybody that has something to say. I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. The people on the school board or in administration don't have a monopoly on good ideas. Everybody has good ideas to offer, and so I like to hear those. It gives me a fuller look at the picture and the decisions that we're going to be making. It's nice that over the last couple of years we've gotten some new board members with new perspectives, and it's definitely changed the way that I look at certain issues, because now I'm able to benefit from this completely different perspective. So I know that I'm one of 9, I'm one perspective, and it's really important to me to hear from people and to really listen to what they're saying and be thoughtful about that and make the decision after listening to all of that seems to be in the best interest of the district and students and everybody who's in the district every day. But I think just listening and making yourself available is the most important thing that you can do. Thank you.
Mr. Gose?
So I agree that, we have to listen, make ourselves available, but I'd also like to point out that sometimes, the mountain doesn't come to you. I attend board meetings very frequently, and oftentimes it's me and the board. And so, so not all parents, every parent has an opinion on what's going on in their schools. Not all of them can make it out on a Tuesday night and voice those concerns. So, you do have to go to them. Like I said, students are involved in so many things. There's so many things happening in the district all the time. If we can make it to, even just a tenth of them, then we'll meet a lot of people. We'll hear a lot of thoughts. At the same time, like I said earlier, it's not the community. If there was a being called the community, they could do this job for us. It comes down to the fact that, these people want this and these people want this, and the district office says that that's not even feasible, so we have to go back with new questions. And so ultimately, like I've been saying, there's this kind of independence of the board because we have to make these difficult decisions in deciding between two different views. And, thankfully, there is a safeguard to that, in that everything we do is low-key checked by the community, in that we're all elected representatives, and that our budgets have to be approved by the voters every year. And that's really where, that's the test. Did we do a good job or not? But ultimately, a lot, more of it comes from us than I think we rhetorically acknowledge. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Maguire.
Thanks, Andre. I think that I covered a little bit of this. There's probably, I could have said 5, but the fifth word isn't going to work out here. But it was social media, surveys, supermarkets, and soccer fields. I'm Catholic. I don't go to synagogue. It could have worked otherwise. But I think you have to be present. You have to be actively involved in the community. I try to engage people through my social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, on discussions and dialogues. And sometimes it comes out and sometimes it doesn't. I think the surveys that the school district does are helpful in understanding what the community's goals and objectives are for the budgeting process, for example. But I think, again, being present and being willing to talk to people at where they are, you have to go to where the people are. So, being out in the supermarket, being, open and willing to have that conversation that somebody may have a concern, and then the same, on the soccer field with the kids. It's important to understand what people want. It's just as important to ask the follow-up question to everybody who tells you what they want, and ask them what are they willing to live with, and what are they okay with. If you only go with the first response and then people what they want, you're going to get very polarized. And I find that as a planner, I have to ask that question a lot. Well, what are you okay with? We're dealing, again, back to Hiawatha Trails and the development that's going on there. The neighborhoods in the area are polarized. There are people that are very much in favor of some level of development, and there are people who want no change. And the question I ask everybody all along is, well, what are you okay with? What is the acceptable alternative? Because no change is not the alternative we're talking about here. Everybody has some acceptable alternative to at the base of things, and I think that's important to not only understand what their immediate reaction is, but to also understand what are the underlying alternatives that people are willing to accept and can handle.
Thank you. And now on to our next audience-submitted question. Beginning with Ms. Hayes. Last year, Dr. Singleton, in response to a question, mentioned that in the future, honor classes would be eliminated. Would you support this kind of decision?
I think that's a tough question to answer right here, right now, without more information. I think I'd like to hear what Dr. Singleton has to say, the rationale behind it, and see if it makes sense. But I think it's important for honors students to have that opportunity to do the work of an honors course, but maybe it doesn't necessarily happen within that box. Maybe it happens in the classroom with other kids and they have additional opportunities. I would have to see how it looks, and I would need more information to give you an appropriate answer on this question, but I do appreciate the question. Thank you.
Mr. Gose?
I think that there's definitely costs to a move like that. As someone who was in a lot of honors classes, it was definitely a benefit to me to not only to to have that extra work, which I didn't like, but to form the relationships and to be able to form the relationships that I kind of was looking for. If there's 400 kids in a class, sorting them out a little bit based on interest, so, you really like history, so you're going to take honors history, and, I personally took Regents geometry because I wasn't good at math. So my interest lied in social studies, and I was taking this class with kids whose interest really lied in social studies. So these are the kids that I wanted to be talking to. So I really think that there are costs. Like Christine said, Dr. Singleton, he's a smart guy. I'm sure that he realizes that there's costs and that he has a plan in place to, mitigate them. But at the same time, I would proceed with caution for something like this. Thank you.
Mr. Maguire?
I'm probably going to, fall in line with Christine here, and I don't have enough information to really adequately respond to that. But I'll give you my gut reaction, because I think that that's what we're here for tonight, is to sort of see how we react to questions like this. I think, in an inclusive environment that we're trying to promote in the schools, it's a challenge to isolate students out and sort of give them these labels and categories. But that being said, I think it's still important to also give students choices and challenges. There are, now let me sort of point back to Ben here. He mentioned that you had a preference for honors social studies or honors history over, honors math, and so you took that route. And I think that that's the right way to go. And maybe it's not the honors label that works for us, but instead allowing students to challenge themselves by pushing into another level of academic study, or take on an additional challenge, but one that has some meaningful achievement at the end. And that could be, just simply, self-fulfilling for the student, or it could open up other doors for them. But I think those choices and challenges, and that goes, just even beyond honors too, by the way. I think that's what students need. They need to have the ability to make those choices that, again, prepare them to be successful at life, prepare them for lifelong success. And whether that's choosing an honors class or choosing a skill like computer programming or a traditional trade, I think those are all important options and choices for our students.
And finally, Mrs. Rivera.
I don't know the context of Damien's answer, so I don't know if I agree or disagree with him, but in terms of having honors classes, I would disagree with getting rid of honors classes. I would want students to be challenged at whatever level they are at, so depending upon, if you look at the students on a continuum, wherever they fall in that continuum, I would want them to be challenged. And so if that means that some students are choose to take an honors class or an AP class, or follow some other level of programming or coursework that they're interested in, then I think they should have that option.
Thank you. And now on to our final audience submitted question. Beginning with Mr. Goes. Would you support flipping the starting time of our elementary schools and high schools, as the research is so compelling as to the benefit of later start time for teens?
Yes.
On to Mr. Maguire.
I was expecting about 2 more minutes, so I certainly understand and appreciate the research on the high school side. I'm not the expert on this, and this is probably one of those areas that I have to rely on the experts to say whether or not this makes sense developmentally and from an educational perspective. But then it also comes down to the logistics of this. Can we make it work with the resources we have? And I think in an ideal world, I think I'll go along with what the experts have to say. If they feel, if the research shows, and it does, that a later start time is more beneficial to our students, then I'm okay with that. But I think a little bit more has to be done on this. But at the same point, if we're going to make a decision on this, we've got to set a deadline and make a decision, because too often we talk about an issue for far too long without getting to a point of decision, and I think that's critical. So yeah, it's not as simple as a yes or no to me. I think more has to be done to get to that decision.
Moving on to Mrs. Rivera.
I would be open to making a later start time for high school. I wouldn't just say flipping it is that simple. I know getting my kids to the bus at 7:15 is hard, so I can't imagine 6:40. That would be pretty difficult. I'm not against changing or making the high school a later start time. I'm open to that. I think would take more than just flipping that. There's so many moving parts to that, so I'm open for that discussion.
Finally, Ms. Hayes.
Yep. I agree with Seema that there's lots of moving parts. It would be something I would consider, but we'd have to look at the big picture and see where everything fell with that. I'm not going to take something off the table immediately. Yes, of course, we would consider all of the options. Thank you.
At this point, we will hear our closing remarks from the candidates, starting with Seema Rivera.
Just, I guess, a few closing remarks that I want you to leave with. One is that I hope I bring a hopeful temperament to the board. I think I've had a reputation of being open, collaborative, and fair, and working well with others. I've tried to be transparent as possible. Like I mentioned, communication is really important to me. I've tried to advocate to have a high school rep sit at our board meetings and participate in the meetings. I know they can't vote. That was shot down, but I'm going to try and advocate for that again. I think it's important to hear from the students themselves. Going forward, I think it's really important that the district works on either, you can call it strategic plan or goals or vision for the district. I think a lot of our decision making will be a little bit easier when we can align our decisions with the goals for the future of the district. I'd also want to, be given this opportunity again to, bring positive change to the school. I think I can be helpful, like I said, after going through this first term. Most importantly, I think I'm a good team member, and so I hope I can bring that. I aim to bring people together and maintain a high kind of expectation of how we function as a board, and so I'd like to continue to work on that. And then lastly, I hope that more people get involved. I know it's really hard. I know it's everybody's really busy, but it's super important. We have a $100 million budget. We have thousands of students, and we have 4 people up here for 4 spots. And so if people are interested or thinking about being involved at the district at different levels, I'm open to answer questions and talk about it, and I hope that we have some more participation. Thank you.
And continuing with Sean Maguire.
Well, thanks again for this opportunity. This has been, I think, like I said, the third opportunity. I think in the past year I've been able to talk with the community as a whole, and you find people as well that have taken a beautiful night and decided to come here. I don't know what you're thinking, but again, I appreciate it. Nothing's changed in the past year. Those values that I have talked about over the past year still remain with me. Again, I'm still here because I'm passionate about what I do. I love my children, I love my community, and I want nothing but for the best for all of us. I think moving forward, I hope that I can be, the theme of a bridge has come through here, so I'll tap into that too. I hope I can be a bridge as well, because I think sometimes I found that we're not always on the same page, and somehow we have got to get together on some things. And that goes, to town hall, into the community, and so on and so forth. I mentioned about parents who said to me during the petitioning process they want to be more involved. They have a real desire and thirst to get involved, and I'd love to tap into that. Again, it would be a waste to lose that energy, and so we've got to find a way to use that and to bring everybody to the table. So I don't want to use all 3 minutes. It's a nice night, and I'll leave it at that. So I appreciate your continued support and hope you'll be there on next Tuesday and you'll vote for me on the ballot. Thank you.
Onward to Miss Hayes.
Thank you again, Andre, and thank you again to the PTA Council and everybody who came out tonight, and to my colleagues here at the table. It really has been an honor and a pleasure to serve in this position. I know it's a big responsibility, and I thank you for entrusting that to me and my colleagues. I think right now it's more important than ever that people stay involved in the work of their community. And ever since I made the decision to seek re-election, it wasn't a decision that I took lightly. I had to balance all of the responsibilities in my life because I don't want to do something halfway. If I say I'm going to do it, I'll be there and I'll do it. And I made sure I have the time to give this the attention and care that it needs because it really is an important job. And so I would ask you to consider giving me your vote next Tuesday. Either way, I think it's important that you get out and vote. And thank you again for the opportunity. I promise to continue to do the best that I can. Thank you.
And closing us out, Benjamin Goes.
So if you couldn't tell tonight, I'm not a politician. My answers are not always quite so lovely as my fellow candidates. But I care so tremendously about the students in this district. I'm a full-time law student, and for those of you who don't know what that means, Christine does, but that's a tremendous amount of work, and it breaks a lot of people. But I still manage to spend 20 hours a week at the high school, and right before this meeting, I was at a tennis match at Mohanison, cheering on some of my students, because I'm 21 years old. I don't have my own kids to take to soccer practice, and I don't have to be at work at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. So I can, dedicate substantial time and effort to my school board responsibilities, and I would because, I really care about these kids. The other thing I wanted to say was that, at the bottom of all my signs, if you see them around town, it says respect students. And I want to say that I think a lot of these difficult decisions that and these difficult issues that we've been talking about tonight are difficult because we're trying to make them. And I think that if kids had more choices and had less, if the way school was designed was less about meeting the external standards of people and more about doing what the kids want, then maybe a lot of these difficult issues wouldn't exist. For example, on the inclusion question, getting rid of honors classes, the difference between an honors class and a Regents class would be the curricular standards, right? But if instead it was just history class and you could pretty much do what you wanted there because there wasn't a specific thing at the end that you needed to meet up to, then there would be no issue. So, like I said at the beginning, I'm a recent student. I'm a young person. I still work in the high school, and I really want to keep the student voices coming from GHS and from the other schools about these issues because it impacts them. They do care, and their voices can probably make our jobs a lot easier. Thank you.
This concludes tonight's forum. I'd like to thank the PTA Council members and all those who assisted in bringing this program to you, the voters. This program will be transmitted on Channel 13-2. Thank you for coming, and remember to vote next Tuesday, May 16th at your local elementary school starting at 7 a.m. Do it for your children. Have a good night.